My name is Bob Iger, and I am sitting here with Brian Grazer. There is an extensive bio of Brian in the conference program that lists his numerous accomplishments. But I thought I would just point out that just in the last few months, Brian is the executive producer of probably the hottest show on television called Empire. Unfortunately, not on a network that we own. And he's also the author of...
You could buy the studio. All right, what?
Don't give me any ideas.
All right, okay.
Also the author of a best-selling book called A Curious Mind, which is what we're primarily going to talk about. So Brian clearly has been on a run these last few months, and on the run. I guess with a curiosity like Brian's, you are running pretty hard all the time. I have the benefit of knowing Brian for over 25 years, and so I have observed his insatiable curiosity firsthand, and I must say that the energy that his curiosity brings to our friendship is something that I truly value and appreciate. So we're going to begin taking people into the mind of a curious mind,
okay,
by starting with sort of how did it all begin for you in terms of the path to discovering the importance of curiosity?
Well, the way it started was I had a grandmother. We all have grandmothers, but I had a grandmother, little Grandma Sonia. And Grandma Sonia was about this tall, way substantially under 5 feet. But she was a big person to me. And so when I was about 5 years old, I used to ask her questions constantly. But at 5 years old, I said to her, "Grandma, what goes faster, a car or a bee?" And she could have just blown the question off, but she really took it seriously. She answered the question in the most comprehensive possible way, and she said, "Curiosity is going to be your superpower. You're going to be a very special, special person, in the best sense." And while she was saying that to me, I was looking at my report cards. My report cards were kind of all Fs. And I thought, she's not looking at this. And she just would continue to tell me how special I'd be and how curiosity will be a powerful force in my life. And, but there was just literally no empirical evidence when you looked at this report card that anything was going to really transpire. But I did use her advice, and she completely validated all these questions that I was asking her, and it gave me an enormous amount of confidence, and I used this power of curiosity all the way through high school and out of college. So it was very useful. And then, in getting out of college, I thought to myself, what did I really learn? And I sort of came to the conclusion pretty quickly I didn't learn very much. So what I should do is go seek someone that I can learn something from. And that was this, I picked the most meaningful professor that I experienced at my school, Dr. Milton Walpin. And I went and I said, "Can I have 10 minutes with you?" He eventually relented, and I turned the 10 minutes into an hour and a half. And I realized that in that hour and a half, I learned much more than I ever could have learned or ever did learn in that year in his class. And probably was the stickiest stuff I ever learned in college, actually. So I just found that the power of curiosity was very useful and could expand my life, and I just brought it into a discipline.
So she gave you the knowledge that curiosity could be really powerful, and then you took it from there, which obviously gave you a level of courage or guts that led you to pursue numerous people that were kind of way outside either your own personal sphere or your own sphere of comfort.
Right.
Particularly in pursuing your career, I was struck by the fact that you pursued at the ripe old age of maybe 22 or 23 a meeting with Lew Wasserman, who was then one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, studio executive in Hollywood.
Right.
Who would probably not spend 5 minutes with someone like you. Somehow or another, not only did you have the guts to see him, but you had the resource in some form or another to figure out how to see him. So what advice did he give you, and where did that lead you?
So what Bob's referring to is I did start this, at 22 years old, I was a law clerk at Warner Brothers, and every day I decided I would go, I created this sort of paramilitary tactic of meeting somebody every single day in the world of show business. But I really had my eyes set on Lew Wasserman, who was really the patriarch of the entire entertainment business at the time, and was the most powerful man. And it took about 7 months, but he eventually met with me. But unlike the other people that I was able to sort of woo and, you know, get to spend a half hour or an hour, hour and a half with, he met me at the 15th floor. I took the elevator up, and as I got off the elevator, he intercepted me and didn't allow me into his office. It was almost like he could...
How did you even get a meeting with him?
I worked...
22 years old. And I was going to ask you that question. If a 22-year-old tried to get to see you, could they?
You have to be pretty strategic.
I'm not asking myself that question, but how does someone do that?
You have to be pretty strategic. I mean, I worked his assistant and the assistant of the assistant, and I just worked their system there. And eventually, his *1 assistant, actually, I went and saw her in the parking lot as she was getting to her car, and I said, I'm that guy that's calling all the time. And her name was Melody, and she arranged for me to have this meeting.
You send her thank you notes every year?
And so, I should, actually.
All right, so what is...
But I got upstairs, and he said to me, what do you have to say? And I really couldn't get much out, because I could tell that there wasn't anything that was going to penetrate him. And rightfully so, probably. And he said, just sit tight, I'll come back. And he went back into his office. He came out with a #2 pencil and a legal tab, and he said, hold these. He said, put the pencil to the paper, and it has greater value than it did as separate parts. Get out of here. So I thought, all right, I'll get out of here. But I did kind of realize what he was saying. He was saying, not only was he saying get out of here, but he was saying create value. And creating value would be in the world of any narrative storytelling was to have some sort of leverage. You could either have money, or you could be the cousin or brother of Bill Murray or some movie star, or you could buy or option material or actually write material. So all the other were not possible for me, so I started writing and manufacturing story ideas, and I soon wrote Splash. I wrote some TV things, and then I wrote Splash.
So I'm going to get into...
It became a movie for your studio.
That's right, it was, well before me.
Yeah.
I'm going to get into all of the people over the years that you've pursued in your desire to learn more and basically to satisfy your own curiosity. But what I'm curious about is this notion, and you talk about it in the book, about curiosity essentially being innate, that everybody has it, and yet not everybody works to either draw it out or to satisfy it in some form. In other words, the pursuit of knowledge or new information or new experiences. And I'm curious, because you've produced many television shows and certainly many movies, and now you've written a book, to what extent is your pursuit of curiosity part of the process of you essentially looking for ideas for your work, or to what extent are you just pursuing curiosity as part of your life, as part of who you are, and then that leads to ideas that obviously show up in your work? It's kind of a chicken and the egg. In other words, are you seeing all these people? I could list them: presidents and performers and
CIA
educators and scientists, and we'll talk about them, as I said. But are you doing that to get ideas? You talked about, a blank piece of paper leads to Splash, which maybe is slightly different, although it was the curiosity that you had to meet Lew Wasserman and pick his brain on, I guess, for career advice. So what comes first? Is it just that your curiosity continues to feed sort of the beast, so to speak, and that leads to all these projects?
Well, I probably operate on two, independent verticals. One is the vertical line of my career, which would be basic storytelling and making documentaries or movies or television shows. And then the other is this discipline or vertical that has as much or greater value than doing my profession. And oddly enough, they intersect, but these curiosity conversations were very pure. They were never to generate an actual idea for a movie or television.
So it wasn't, I'm looking for a movie idea, I'll go out and meet 20 people and something will come from that.
No, that was never the intention. It was never the intention, and I didn't think it would work. I didn't think that kind of motive would work. I didn't like that motive. I just wanted to expand my worldview and be able to curate my life and my professional life better. and have a creative or competitive edge over other people. And I felt like by meeting people in science or technology or athletics or all art forms, technology, engineering, any of those things, and many Nobel laureates, what it would do is it would take me out of my location, for sure. I met the first AIDS scientist. I flew to Boston. I mean, I just did things to get myself out of that location, to learn about the subject, but to immediately try to enter the psyche of the person I'm speaking to. And meaning probably entering their emotional psyche, so that, because everybody's going through something. I mean, Kary Mullis, I just randomly brought his name up. He won the Nobel Prize in 1993 for creating this methodology related to the genome, and he won the Nobel Prize in chemistry for this. It was called the PCR. It was a way to enlarge in your, the possibility of reading the letters of your genome. And so, but he is just, that was just a random thing that I did because I wanted to meet this particular person. And by meeting him...
There wasn't another goal in mind other than to satisfy your curiosity.
Just to satisfy my curiosity, to understand his life process, how this happened.
And where did that lead? By meeting him?
Well, actually, what I learned immediately was that he was a surfer. He lived in La Jolla and was a surfer. And he wasn't Philo Farnsworth, but he discovered this thing in kind of a random way. And I realized that by jogging your mind by meeting different people, it takes you out of the cycle, not only out of the universe of Los Angeles, but it gets you out of the rumination of thought that isn't original.
Mm-hmm.
So I just
it's
found
an expanding of your horizon, so to speak. So tie some of what you made to some of your curiosity pursuits. So one, Apollo 13. Give us the genesis.
Okay.
We know the story, or some people do, of the Apollo mission that went awry. What led you to want to make a movie about that?
Okay, so Apollo 13, I didn't know anything about aviation, and that wasn't the hook. Basically what had happened, and it's in this book, is I met a woman named Veronica, actually, quickly, I met Sting over 30 years ago, actually in 1984, and because he blew up. The police were so on fire. I thought I have to meet him. I wanted to understand his art form. I met him. He, 2 years later, introduced me to a woman named Veronica de Negre. Veronica de Negre, he and Bruce Springsteen were taking around for a short time on their amnesty tour. She had survived torture in Chile. She was a political prisoner and had lived in Chile, was in Chile being tortured for a year and a half. So I had a chance to meet this woman named Veronica de Negre. It had a tremendous impact on me. But in understanding torture, you had to understand survival. So I spent a lot of energy with she and others understanding survival. So when I got this little 12-page outline to Apollo 13, I didn't really know about the Apollo program, really. Not really. And I didn't really know about the hardware of outer space and aerodynamics and all that, but I knew a lot about survival. So my seat at the table, so to speak, was how I would relate to it. So she shifted, she wasn't the source of an idea, but she shifted my perspective. And that's what I think all of these
meetings... So it wasn't just about telling the story of a space mission that had an explosion. It was telling the story about survival.
About three men.
And you were attracted to that because of her story.
Yes. I was able to have tremendous amount of empathy. So there was a real bridge between my point of view and what Jim Lovell was expressing in these 12 pages. So that was
does
really...
everything that you make emanate from one of these discoveries? Like 8 Mile, which was M&M, or Empire, talk about that, for instance, or Beautiful Mind,
yeah.
Russell Crowe. What's the genesis? What in your, again, in this curiosity pursuit led to those? I think they're interesting stories because there's a...
Well,
they're not straight lines.
No, they're not. They're really not straight lines. I mean, my first epiphany was that each one of these people that I met was like living inside of a constellation of dots, and that all of these dots, these disparate dots, weirdly connect, and they sometimes connect 20 years later, a year later, but all of these things, these meetings all had were the dots connected. And in the case of 8 Mile and Empire, what happened is I was in New York. I overheard, I wasn't really focused on it, but I was listening to this local radio station, and a rapper named ODB, Old Dirty Bastard, is on the radio. And I thought to myself, who names themselves Old Dirty Bastard? I mean, I thought that would be a thing you'd hide, not you'd name yourself. So he named himself Old.
We know some Old Dirty Bastards, but we just don't brand them that, right? Or they don't call, they're not on their business card.
Yeah, that's private. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I decided I wanted to meet Old Dirty Bastard. Who could possibly say, I go meet Old Dirty Bastard. He's a total character. He's on the sidewalk.
Really? Yes?
We do have, Bob and I have coffee at least once a week, or at that Brentwood Country Mart. You'll see us there. This is how it plays out. I'll say something.
You old dirty bastard.
For a moment, he takes it seriously, and then he just completely makes fun of me.
All right.
Okay,
on point.
So on point. So Old Dirty Bastard, I meet him. Interesting. He's the lead
hip-hop
singer.
artist.
Hip-hop. He's the lead singer to this pioneering, to the Wu-Tang Clan, which was an East Coast hip-hop band. Because I met him, I decided to meet other hip-hop artists, Chuck D, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, a guy named Slick Rick, equally as comical as ODB. Wears a crown, has gold teeth.
You remember all of this.
I can remember it. And that got me very interested about this culture that was classified as an inferior subculture. So that stuck in my mind, that it was classified as an inferior subculture, got me to meet other people. Eventually, I knew a very good friend of mine, Jimmy Iovine. I said, let's meet Eminem. Because I saw Eminem on a television, the VMAs. And in any event, I get Eminem in my office. He won't talk. He's got that steely urban glare, doesn't say a thing. He won't even look at me. So for 45 minutes, eventually I said, because I'm feeling like this isn't, certainly not going anywhere. I said, come on, man, can you animate? And he looked at me like he was going to kill me. But then he actually told his story, and that became 8 Mile. So from all those guys, Chuck D, ODB, blah, blah, became that. That later became a very strong relationship with Jay-Z, who ended up doing a soundtrack for me on a movie called American Gangster. Because of Jay-Z and all this stuff, when Empire came around, Danny Strong said, let's do King Lear in the world of hip-hop. I said, what else do you know? He said, that's all I know. I said, well, I know something about hip-hop. I hope you know something about King Lear. And then in came Lee Daniels, and the three of us sort of cooked up this idea, and the two of them wrote it, and it became Empire. So a lot of branches to the tree.
I'm a little exhausted listening to all of this.
I should have done this fast.
Is it exhausting? So you have an insatiable
completely
curiosity.
Exhausting.
Do you sleep? Do you sleep?
Well, I try.
Or do you get up in the middle of the night and do you have a pad on your nightstand and you take notes on, I want to meet the next version of ODB? Or, seriously, it sounds exhausting.
Yeah, I do that. I'm always kind of thinking of what subject, what's the new subject, who's the new person. It's exhausting to think of the names, but it's even more exhausting to try to track all these people down and work out time. And you do have to say, look, there's no agenda. You're not going to gain anything. Nothing's going to happen except this conversation. We'll both be in the present, and hopefully something will evolve.
Although now it's easier because people know Brian Grazer. So when you started out,
it took a year to meet Floyd Mayweather, and I'd won an Oscar. And had Empire. But, you know.
So there have been
But it's all doable.
So there have been hundreds of these interviews that you've done. Presidents, President Obama, Clinton, Bush, Reagan, for instance. You mentioned the scientists, performing artists, athletes. I mean, I think of the list. I was shocked because there's a list in the book.
Yeah, in the appendix.
That is kind of shocking. Talk about the most memorable, either the most interesting, the most exciting people you've met, people that exceeded your expectations, because the book is filled with some really good stories about that.
Yeah.
Names.
Well, the funnest is Princess Di, because I did the most insane thing.
You set about to meet her?
I set about to meet Princess Di, and I thought I could just call Buckingham Palace. That didn't really work. But I sent letters. I did a lot of different things for a couple of years. I just thought that seemed like an interesting task. But then all of a sudden, the stars, moons, and planets aligned themselves, and I'd produced Apollo 13, and we got invited to do a royal premiere. So I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing. This is like calculated on her behalf. Not really. So now all of a sudden we're doing a royal premiere. We do the premiere, and 300 people are asked to have dinner. And everybody stands for Princess Di, and there's a seat that's right in front of me. It's Princess Di's seat. She comes to that seat. I stand up, and I do think to myself, I have to get outside of this royal etiquette. Otherwise, nothing will happen. There'll be nothing I'll learn. There'll be no breakthroughs. So I immediately speak louder. I tell jokes. She's laughing at the jokes. That's egging me on. I want to do more. And I'm really having a great hour and a half with her. Dinner's over, desserts, and I said, I was on this jag of wanting to eat ice cream all the time. So I said, don't you guys have any ice cream? And she summoned ice cream. All of a sudden, ice cream appeared. And I said 2 spoons. I ate had a couple of scoops, and I said, would you like some ice cream? She digs in and has a scoop. Now I'm thinking I'm actually making out with Princess Di. I feel pretty much like something's happening between us. I have some more scoops. Then I ask her again. She has another scoop. I feel like there's a meaningful connection. And that was pretty much the night. It was interesting. Because at 12 o'clock, at 5 to 12, everybody started to move around. Everybody that knew what was going on, she had to leave exactly at 12. That was the end. I did have contact with...
You know the story about princesses and 12 o'clock, right?
I do.
I know.
Yeah. Of course. That's right. That's right.
So you expected that she could be impenetrable, and she wasn't. So the surprise there was that you were able to make a connection.
Wow.
Even though there was a bubble around her, so to speak.
Right, and I'm going to take that thought to my next speech.
And name others?
Well, Jonas Salk gave me a lot of confidence, actually. I'd met, it was about a couple of years into this process, but I was still young. I had just then really produced Splash. It was a couple of years from at that point. But I'd really wanted to meet Jonas Salk. That took about a year, but eventually I wore them down because he had just hired a MacArthur grant, brand new MacArthur grant student named Joan Abramson. I remember very vividly. And I tried this whole circuit of people to meet with him. And she said, look, if you come to the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, he's giving a speech. You can meet him at the green room. I'll let you say hello. So I'm thinking, great. Because I think with my hello, I'll turn it into more than that. Basically, I get somebody to drive me. I'm so nervous. I'm so frazzled by this. Because it's been a year and a half or so in the making. I get off the elevator, I look around, I see the green room. I see Dr. Jonas Salk. I start walking towards him. I'm even more nervous. As I approach him, I vomited. It just was so nervous. And he could have done a whole bunch of different things. But I guess after all, he is a doctor. So he came to help me. He put his hand under my head. I laid back a little bit, said it was blood sugar, and he kind of brought me back to life. And that became the beginning of this relationship. And I got to know him very well, to the point where he'd say, I'll come to your house, you bring 3 people, a total of 4 on your side. I'll bring 3 people, a total of 4 on my side, and we'll spend a day with no agenda, just have food. And we did these little parlors kind of quarterly. And he was gigantically inspirational. That was a big thing. And
you discovered along the way that how prepared you were for these things contributed mightily to, for these interviews, contributed mightily to whether they were profitable for you or whether they were worthwhile.
Yeah.
Not profitable from a commercial perspective, but I mean in terms of satisfying your curiosity. There was one where you were thoroughly unprepared with also an extremely well-known person. And that ended up being essentially a 10-minute meeting, right?
Yeah, well, it was a 1-minute meeting. It was with Isaac Asimov, who's was the most prolific writer of science, arguably the most prolific writer of science fiction, including I, Robot. But that took quite a long time. I flew from LA to New York on my little coach ticket, got off, got to the Ritz-Carlton West, got to the hotel, got to the bar. I ordered like a club soda. He and his wife at the time showed up and they said, we'll have ginger ale. I started to talk. As their ginger ale got to their lip, they put it down. They said, we're leaving. It was under a minute. I said, you're leaving? We're leaving. And she said, it's clear you do not know enough about the subject of my husband's work. You don't know enough about science fiction or robotics. We're leaving, aren't we, Isaac? And he just, yes. They left.
It ended.
But I did feel like I wasn't prepared.
So you go now to every one of these things with a set of questions that you have?
I go with a set of questions, with a sort of a driving force of what those questions will be. But I know that I have to start with something that's interesting. I do have to do,
There's no agenda, but there is an agenda.
But you have to have a pivot point. And so often, what I've learned in the last 10 years is that I come right away with a gift of some knowledge that I think they'll want. So if I met Vivienne Westwood or Ralph Lauren, I brought them a piece of music, separately, of course. Because you have to imagine that fashion design involves music. So if I could bring them something that I don't think they know, that's valuable. And it has its own sort of power because it creates trust, it shows that you care.
Mm-hmm. And all of it. Breaks the ice.
And what?
And it breaks the ice.
And it breaks the ice, yeah.
So people that you were dying to meet but never got a chance to that may not be alive today, who'd you miss?
Well,
or by the same token, who's out there today that you feel you have to meet and haven't been able to or just haven't had the time to yet? Both.
Well, there's a whole,
you can go back in history,
yeah,
of course.
We go back in history.
But in your lifetime?
In my lifetime, look, I'd love to meet Putin. I mean, that would be so polarizing.
I've met Putin.
There you go.
It was interesting.
What was it like? Well, what did you learn out of it?
Well, I went to meet him because we were doing business there, but I ended up in a really interesting discussion with him about Nikita Khrushchev's attempt to visit Disneyland in the 1950s. That never happened. And he was enwrapped with that story. This is not about me, but Khrushchev was coming to Los Angeles in the late 50s, and he ultimately did. And a very enterprising Walt Disney himself decided that it would be a great gesture, maybe a PR gesture, to invite Khrushchev as his guest to Disneyland, which he did, and Khrushchev accepted. But when President Eisenhower and the Eisenhower administration found out that the then leader of the communist world, then the USSR, was coming to an American icon like Disneyland, the Eisenhower administration said, no way. We can't have Khrushchev seen at Disneyland. So they concocted a story about it not being safe. They couldn't essentially guarantee Khrushchev's safety. And therefore he couldn't go. And I think the police chief of Los Angeles ended up stepping forward saying, no, he can't go, we can't guarantee his safety. And Khrushchev ended up going a bit nuts. And they ended up having a lunch for him in his honor, I think in Century City, maybe on the Fox lot, that was attended by, I think, Rock Hudson and Frank Sinatra and others. But I told, and this story is well documented, and I told Putin that story because Putin had visited Disneyland before he was Putin.
Oh, he did?
He did. And I told him the story about Khrushchev, which he had not heard, and he was then at the edge of his chair.
Then
he showed me a great interest in coming to Disneyland, as you'd expect. Anyway, but we're not, it's not about us or me, so back to you.
Was he, well, okay.
So there's Putin.
Did he speak English with you?
Mostly it was through an interpreter, but when we were talking about Disneyland, he clearly understood.
The last question, what was his energy like? Intimidating?
No, he had good energy, good curiosity too, actually. We're very well prepped. I was surprised at how prepped he was in preparation for the meeting with me. No, nothing out of the ordinary in terms of personality.
Right.
Okay, back to you. Anyone else? Who else do you want to meet?
The other day...
Maybe we can help.
What?
Maybe we can help.
You can help. You probably can. There's no question you can. The other day I met Elizabeth Holmes, who's advanced medical testing. I met her at the Time 100, and I'd love to really spend some time with her. Actually, Craig Ventnor, who I know is here at the Milken Institute conference, he said, "You've got to meet this girl. You've got to meet her. You're going to be happy you did this," because I met Craig Ventnor at least 10 years ago, who's advanced sequencing of the genome. And he said, and I met her, and I was really blown away, and I would love to spend time with her. I'd like to meet, I did a speech sort of side by side to Tom Brady, but I didn't really get to talk to Tom Brady. But he said something to the effect, and you might know Tom Brady. I know Bob Kraft, if he's here, knows him. That he has 100 plays in his head. And to have access to 100 plays, I just, you know, when you're on the field and it's just kind of human capability, I just admire it.
So that's what you'd be curious about with
Really curious, like what are the play variations? How does that work? How do you, in the moment, how does that all, what's the process of that? How do you access it and then execute it? And does it change midstream? All those kinds of things. I'd love to ask that.
So going back to what I mentioned earlier, if someone like you tried to get to you,
all right,
the way you did Lou Wasserman, for instance, could they? And what advice would you give them? What would you say? Would you say, here's a piece of paper, here's a pencil, you know,
get out of here?
What would you do? Do you have, and does this happen? Do people?
It does happen, sure. It does happen. Well, I try to always be really very polite, very, very polite. And then in the politeness, I get a reading on the person. More often than not.
But could someone get, do you see people? In other words, a 22-year-old like Brian Grazer, just starting out the business, somehow or another knows your assistant, meets her in a parking lot, whatever the story was.
Oh,
if they
did that, no, that's a great question. No one is like, if they did that tactic, I would do it. If they
showed very resourcefulness, in other words,
if they could get through the assistants and had some soft.
You better not give this away, by the way. You'll get inundated.
So I would do it, and I would do that. But usually it doesn't work that way. They don't usually go to assistants. They usually try to get you on the fly. And they really just want to know how to get a movie made, or what are the keys to the kingdom, and then I don't want to do that.
Do you tell them?
I do it if they've I do it if they do what I did, if they're well researched, and I can look into their eyes and there's something soulful about it beyond just like get me in there.
So you look, and is that in part looking for someone's curiosity? If you're assessing people, or let's just talk about people in general, how important is curiosity? Particularly, most of what you do is create. So you're in business with others that create as partners of yours, Ron Howard being maybe a great example of that. You're looking for experience, you're looking for intelligence, you're looking for character and integrity, you're looking for curiosity. Where does curiosity fit in the scale? Is it more important than intelligence? You said looking for something behind their eyes, and I get that.
Yeah.
And can you glean that even from a quick meeting with somebody? Are they a curious person? But how important is it?
It's very important. I sometimes don't have the patience to really focus on that, but I can tell if somebody's just being expedient. Expedient means like they just want a job, or they just want an object. If they just want an object, I feel that's impure, and I'm not into that.
And is it, okay, sorry.
But if it's real curiosity, or I can sense real character. Like I did a book signing at USC, and like 700, 800 kids were like, or people were coming, not all kids. Some kid, his father is the CEO of a major company, and he just, hat in hand, didn't say his dad's name, just said his name, and I signed the book, and he's just doing it on his own. And I'm going to FaceTime him, and he lives in New York, so I'll FaceTime him and have a real conversation with him on Thursday. So if I feel something real, but more often you don't. So... or one doesn't. But I think that probably character might be as important or more important than curiosity. I don't know. Curiosity is pretty high.
But it's definitely up there.
I mean, curiosity to me means the interest in challenging something further to get to the truth. And if you feel, and that's the point of these conversations. It's not the first question or the first answer. It's all that stuff that's building during these questions and answers, and watching body language and eye contact and pupil dilation and all that kind of information, failing and succeeding. Did you notice how I did that? Failing and succeeding in the conversation. And that builds to inspiration, inspiration and ultimately sometimes breakthroughs.
But then thinking about all these people that you've met.
Yes.
You obviously were pursuing them because you were the curious one.
But I knew they had curiosity.
Was it interesting to see, yes, which one of them, were those people were curious? In other words, you're meeting either current or future or past presidents of the United States.
Yeah.
Do they seem curious? Because I find sometimes, not necessarily with presidents, but I'll call it with accomplished people, with celebrities, they can often, they're so used to people always being curious about them that I think they sometimes forget.
Oh, yeah,
or it's just not part of sort of what they do on a daily basis, ask other people questions. Are there people that stood out?
Yes.
For being curious? Was President Obama curious? Put you on the spot?
Yeah. I think almost all, 90% of the people that met me, which could be 1,000 people, are all curious. First of all, they're curious enough to show up.
They ask you questions.
They ask me questions. They might be shy or socially clumsy, or there's all kinds of awkwardness, but if you take it upon yourself to be I always made the pledge for me was to be a good date, to always make sure that they felt comfortable, really, really comfortable. I met Latricia Ballridge, and I asked about manners versus etiquette, because she was with the Kennedys and was
Social secretary.
And she said, etiquette is all the hardware, and manners is the love. And love means like making people feel comfortable at all the time. You invite someone to your house, you tell them who else is coming. You create context all the time. So I try to do that, but there was one person I laughed, super powerful person that had zero curiosity. I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't believe it. And I spent 2 hours with him. He never asked one question. And I even spent more time with him. I can't say because you'll know then who he is. He had zero, he had zero curiosity. Everything was a declarative sentence.
Politician?
No. Because they can fake it. They can fake the orgasm.
I know actors can.
They definitely can.
Politicians can too, huh?
Let me ask you about curiosity. How do you use curiosity? How does it factor into your life? Did it factor into any of the acquisitions you made over your tenure?
I don't think you can run a company today that is doing business in a very dynamic marketplace. You can't do it successfully without being curious for a variety of reasons. First of all, curiosity leads to pursuit of new knowledge or learning things that you don't know. If you don't learn or don't seek to learn, then you don't try new things. And if you don't try new things, then you're stuck in a status quo in a world that's so dynamic so that the marketplace passes you by. So I actually believe it's really important at Disney, not just for me, but for a lot of people who work for me, that curiosity is an incredibly important, vital, actually, component or attribute to success, either as an executive of the company or for the company itself. I don't think we would have made acquisitions without us being curious, not just me, but as a company, curious about a business that we don't own, curious about, meaning what is it, what is its essence, what is its potential as part of our company, and then of course, being curious about, well, if we owned it, where could it go? What would we do with it?
So that's your internal dialogue.
Definitely. I don't think you say, I'm going to be curious today, so I'll learn about Marvel.
Right.
But it was curiosity about a storytelling genre, superheroes, about a company that was then publicly traded but relatively independent, meaning relatively narrow in focus, about a company that was just on the verge of some success that I was curious about and we were curious about. So I think it definitely played a role. The other thing that I think that is really important is technology is having such a profound impact on media and entertainment, both on the creation side, well, on the creation side, on the distribution side, and on the consumption side. So if you're not curious, say, about technology, then you don't really know how to deploy it. You don't invest properly, you don't know how to deploy it for the good of the company. And so that's maybe another example of it. And I actually make a concerted effort when I meet people who are potential employees or employees of the company who I'm discussing advancement or promotion. I try to determine whether they are curious. I don't say, are you curious? But you can very quickly get under someone's skin, so to speak, or peel back the outer layer and determine whether they're curious. And it could be just it seems like it's sort of an icebreaker or conversation, meaning you sit down before you ask the questions about the job or who they are. You simply say, "What movies did you see? What you reading any books these days? Where did you have you traveled anywhere interesting?" It doesn't mean you ask all three of those questions.
Right.
You ask one, and if you get a really quick, "Hey, I'm reading this," or "I just saw this movie and I really liked it," or "I just went to wherever it was in the world," and it seems very natural to them, then it's a good read on whether they're curious. It's not the only one. It doesn't guarantee it. And you can also quickly tell whether someone's trying to fake being an interesting person. Usually.
Yeah, you can, yes. Yeah. No, there's somebody.
But it's important. I don't know that. I don't know that you can succeed in
Fake trying to be an interesting person. I love that. That's great.
Well, people do that.
They do that. They do. Or artificial questions, things like that. So, how about in Shanghai? When is Shanghai?
You're turning this around.
Well, we got a few minutes, and people want to know a little bit.
3 minutes.
Yeah, 3 minutes. When did you start Shanghai? First of all, I don't really know. Like 8 years ago?
When did the company start building Shanghai Disneyland?
Yeah.
Well, the company pursued building a theme park in China in the late 90s.
Oh, I see.
Actually, before I was CEO. And then ultimately decided to build a park in Hong Kong first.
Oh, okay.
And then pursued building a park in Shanghai starting in the early part of the century.
Right.
And entered into roughly a 10-year negotiation. That
10-year negotiation.
Yeah, a long time.
So before you could break any ground, do anything, you have a 10-year negotiation.
Yeah, for a variety of reasons. Very complex agreement to enter into. And we broke ground 3-4 years ago. I don't remember. I think it was 2000. I think we did the deal in 2011, and we're going to open in 2016.
Wow.
Yes, in case you're curious.
I am.
So go back.
Okay.
We'll finish on the book since
okay.
Sort of started on that.
All right. Okay.
Was it easy writing a book about this, or did you?
Well, it seemed like it might be easy, but then it wasn't easy. It took 2 years, but they're not hard-earned years. I mean, it's just you have to be really attentive to it, and you have to. It's on your mind all the time to finish it and make it.
But you made movies and you made TV shows, so this is a completely different art form.
Yeah, completely.
Was it a totally different muscle set that was needed, or?
Pretty much. Well, also because I know that curiosity is an important tool for everybody, and I know it's valuable. But I did think it was kind of important to not only tell these stories.
Is it an advice book for people?
I think it's entertaining because it has many of these stories and how the story of the person had some interlinked somehow into something more tangible, either a movie or television show, or just there are many other tangible things that happened, were byproducts of these meetings. So basically, it's a synthesis of all of that, and there is a how-to application. Definitely tells you how to do it. You could start it immediately. You start it with a neighbor. You don't have to go meet princes.
So it's essentially tapping into people's innate curiosity, enabling people to tap into their own innate curiosity for their own good.
I mean, I met Blake Griffin just recently. But what happened?
I don't know that everybody knows. Blake Griffin plays for the Clippers.
Perfect, yes. And he's how old now, 24?
I think he's maybe a couple of years old.
A couple of years old. Anyway, I met Blake Griffin. He's just a giant superstar. He's in my office, so I'm now meeting the principal, Blake Griffin.
He came to see you
because he came to see me.
Curious?
I think so. So he got him, I'm meeting Blake Griffin, and then I say to him, how do you know who to trust? I mean, you're, what, 21 years old when it all happened, giant contract. Who do you trust? He says, well, I had this guy that I really like. He's not a superstar, but he's now a sports agent, blah, blah. I said, can I meet him? And he's, he's just, he's not a big guy or anything. So I've now met Blake Griffin, but I'm really determined to meet who Blake Griffin could possibly trust, and really, because Blake Griffin's a smart guy with great intuition. You can feel it. And I go meet this guy. Basically, he was one of 100 assistant DAs in Philadelphia for about 10 years, making $11,000 a year, waking up at 4:30 in the morning with 100 other guys just to do that job. I said, how do you do that? And he said, I just felt like I was making a difference. And I thought, to me, that was the sum total of so many, I mean, that was amazing.
Is this leading to a movie?
No, it's just, but I just thought it was substantive. No.
Okay.
Just, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies and
Oh,
gentlemen.
look at this.
Brian Grazer.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.